Hello audience, what are you doing in my unfinished bathroom? Oh, you're here to learn about PEX? Sweet, let's do it. Welcome back everyone. This video is going to be about PEX, piping, and manifold systems. So I have a series going on with this house where I'm remodeling it. I don't always do super helpful things like this video, but I do try and record what I'm doing. Those videos are lagging by about 4 months. So this video, talking about PEX, doing new plumbing in my house, it's a little ahead of where I am in the series. So if you go back and watch the series, and I'm just now tearing drywall out from this exact wall, that's why it's lagging a little bit, so please forgive me about that. But without further ado, let's talk about PEX, because that's what I chose to do in my house. And it was a decision to make, and so I figure there's other people out there trying to make the same decision. Yeah, and there's a lot of good insight I found. So here we go. First off, this is for homeowners. I am not a professional. I don't even install this. I didn't install most of what is in my house, so don't take what I say as absolute truth, because it's not. So let's start out with, what is PEX? PEX is cross-linked polyethylene. Fancy way of saying plastic. So let's talk about some of the pros of PEX. First off is it's easy to install. It's a little bit flexible. You can bend it around corners. All you need to do is kind of like wiring. You drill and fish it through. And the fittings are really easy to use. Sometimes you need a special tool, but there's no heat necessary, no solder, nothing like that. Another great benefit to PEX is it can freeze without bursting. So it is flexible. When the water freezes in here, it'll just expand, and then once the water heats back up, it'll contract. So 9 times out of 10, it will not burst. Whereas copper piping, pretty much every time it freezes, it bursts. The next thing is it's corrosion resistant. Being plastic, it's not really affected by any impurities in the water, and so no buildup is gonna happen. Nothing's gonna stick to it. It's not gonna rust or anything like that. It's very durable. One of the things I like about it a lot is it's quiet. The water flows through it a lot quieter than a metal pipe. Water hammer is not as evident. So water hammer is when you shut off the tap really fast, or your washing machine turns on and off. The water is flowing, and then all of a sudden it can't flow anymore, so it just slams to a stop. And then that's why sometimes when you're in a house with copper, you hear the copper bang against the framing. So PEX still does that a little bit, but one, it's plastic, so you don't have this metal ringing, and two, it is flexible, so the water hammer can kind of be absorbed in the flexibility of the pipe. And the last main pro is color coded. So it's really easy to figure out which is hot and which is cold, unless you didn't plumb it right, then just confusing. But some of the cons being plastic, it is not UV protected, so if it sits outside, it's no good. I've heard them say about 30 days, and then after 30 days the pipe is compromised. Don't go and buy PEX at a place that has it outside, or sitting on a shelf next to a skylight. I would pick a different place, because you don't want to go through all that work just to have it deteriorate. And the only other con I can really think of is how you actually install it, how you crimp the fittings on. I don't have any spares right here, but sometimes you need a special tool. Usually you do need a special tool, and the tools vary in price and depending on which style of crimping you need. So that is a little bit of a downfall. Okay, so there are a couple different kinds of PEX. So if you go to the store, most stores have, I think, all 3 kinds. There's PEX A, PEX B, and PEX C. Very creative names. Yeah, so there's not a whole lot different between them. As you go down from A, B, C, they get less flexible, but also cheaper. So PEX A is the most flexible, most easy to run, but the most expensive. And this is just based off of how they manufacture it. There's nothing really inherently different about how they perform. And then you go all the way down to PEX C, and it's really stiff, but it's really, really cheap. So anyway, let's go ahead and talk about the next thing, which is fittings. Like, how do you actually connect this PEX to other PEX or other things, and like manifolds, like we'll talk about later. So the method that we used in this house was a copper crimp. So basically, it's nice and simple. You take the end of end of the hose, and unfortunately I don't have any spares, but you just stick a little copper ring over, stick the fitting in, and then crimp it with a crimp tool. There's a couple different kind of crimp tools, but it's as simple as that. If you have the tool, pretty much anyone can do it. Another kind of crimp is an expansion. So you take the pipe, stick a tool inside, and you keep expanding, and then you stick the fitting in, and there's a little collar that goes on, and then you put it in the fitting, and then after a couple seconds it'll start shrinking back to its normal size, and it will shrink onto the fitting. Personally, coming from an automotive background, I hate those kind of connections when they're used in automotive. They just don't seem to be as durable, but it's proven to be pretty good in PEX. But we did not use that at this house. And there's another kind of crimp that's just a stainless steel version of the copper that I mentioned before. It's a little bit bigger, maybe a little bit more durable, but there's not really any difference to that. You can also use a compression fitting, if you know what that is, where you stick a little piece inside the hose, and you have a threaded nut that goes over the hose or the pipe, and then you can thread it onto a fitting, and it kind of acts both like a expansion type but also a crimp at the same time. They're pretty good. They work even on hard surfaces like copper, but that same principle can be used on this. It's just a lot more things to worry about, a lot more things rather than just that copper ring, so that's also why I didn't use that. And the last kind of fitting is a push to connect. So you've probably heard of the shark bite, where it comes in and it's got little fingers, so you slide it over and then the fingers kind of lock it in place. This is also common in other fields I've dealt with in engineering, and it's great, and I've never really had problems with it, but would I trust it behind sheetrock where I can't get to it if it starts leaking? Probably not. I think I'll pass on that and go with a crimp style. So Matt Reisinger has a really good video I'll link down below on pressure testing fittings and PEX, different kinds of PEX. And it is absolutely insane how much pressure these can take, and the fittings. I think in the video every single pipe blew out, not by a fitting. So the fittings were all stronger than the pipe, which is just kind of mind-blowing. But yeah, if you want to watch that video, go down in the description and I'll link it down there. Alright, now let's talk a little bit about installation of PEX. I have discovered it's a whole lot like electrical. I like electrical because you can go around with a hammer, a couple staples, and a drill, and you can run a whole house wiring. Which is just fantastic. You just hardly need any tools. PEX is a whole lot like that. Unlike copper, where you need to lug around solder and paste and a torch and a drill and all these hangers and everything like that, this stuff is just so easy to run. You can just drill through, you know, bottom plates, studs, whatever you want. Well, not whatever you want, but within reason, and just thread it in and then fish it all the way to where you need it to go. You can run it extra and then crimp stuff and then feed it back so it's nice and tight where you need it. A lot of stuff like that you can't do with copper, so that's why I like it. Very easy to install. It's also very easy to secure. Just plastic, I don't know what they're called, plastic tie downs, holds. Yeah, these things right here. So it just got a nail in it, and you just clamp it around, tack the nail in, and you're done. I mean, it's a piece of cake. Okay, so now that you know a little bit about PEX, I can talk about why I used it, some of the things I like about it, and just its general personality. Wow, that's not really the right word, but you know what I mean. Every time you have a 90, there's a pressure drop. There's an inherent pressure drop. It's just physics, fluid dynamics. So in copper, you have 90s everywhere and T's everywhere. So by the time, say if you have a medium-sized house, by the time the hot water or cold water gets up to the second floor, it might have gone through, you know, 10 90s. Hopefully not. That's maybe a little extreme, but at least a handful. And every time it goes through a 90, the water loses energy, and so by the time you go through 6 or 7, your pressure is dropped because it's lost that energy to flow. PEX is not like that. So you can see I've bent it into a 90. That is a 90, but it's a nice smooth 90 with a huge radius. So it doesn't lose hardly any energy. So that's a really cool thing about PEX. You can bend it around corners and all this kind of stuff. So the flow, you don't lose pressure hardly at all. You can use fittings with it. You can use 90s where you need to, but you don't have to if you don't want to. Another important thing about it is lifespan. So when you're thinking about doing something in a house that's going to be covered up, you want it to last as long as possible within your financial limits. So PEX, cheap, way cheaper than copper. Will it last though? The studies say yes. We're looking at probably a reliability less than copper, but probably more than any other plumbing system you can buy today. And to give a year on that, I think a couple people online, including Matt Reisinger, quote that it should last 50 to 100 years. So even on the low end, 50 years, that is totally acceptable for plumbing. Before 50 years, the house will probably be remodeled at least once. Knowing my houses at least. And I would say if you're asking if this is right for you to use PEX, probably. There's a lot of benefits, there's not a lot of downfalls. If you have a plumber that you hired and he doesn't want to use it and he wants to use copper, I would not argue with him because he has the expertise, but if your plumber is pushing you to PEX, I would say, yeah, go for it. Let's save the money, get it done faster. Definitely a good option. Now let's talk about manifolds. You can see the one behind me in my house and how we routed it. Very, very satisfying to look at. But before I tell you about manifolds, you kind of need to know that there are other styles of plumbing because you might think this is the only way to plumb. Makes sense, you know? What else is there? So there's a couple main ways of plumbing a house. So basically you got manifold style and then trunk and branch style, which you think of a tree, you got the trunk and then it splits off into a bunch of different branches. So that technique is basically bringing in the city water, running a big heavy duty line basically through the middle of the house and then teeing off of that, going up to different fixtures and maybe having a smaller branch go upstairs and then even that tees off into other things. We'll talk about the benefits and downfalls of that, but those are the two styles, trunk and branch and manifold. And it really is worth thinking about which style is best for you in your house. Most houses, if you're remodeling, you got to be just stuck with whatever you already have because it's really difficult to change out the whole house. But my house, we had to redo everything. It was easy access, so we decided to redo everything. So a quick review of a water circuit. Most houses have a meter and a regulator outside the house. So there'll be a little port, you know, be a manhole. Well, it's not a manhole because you couldn't fit in it, but a little port, and then you pop that off, and then there'll be a meter and a regulator down there. So the city water gets metered, so they can charge you, and regulated down to the pressure for your house. Then it comes in the wall. For my house, I actually have the meter and the regulator in the basement. Some neighborhoods are like that around here. So once it gets into the house and it's metered and regulated, and hopefully there's a valve or two in there too, so you can turn it off in the case of an emergency, that water gets pumped basically right into the water heater and then tees off into whether you're using a trunk and a branch or a manifold system. So I don't actually have that set up yet. That is next on the plumbing list. We have to put the water heater in and finalize the section between the city and the manifold. So the water coming in from the city just tees off between the water heater and your manifold or your trunk style. So one thing to think about with a trunk and a branch versus a manifold is kind of what I would call hot water theory. So how do you get the most efficient hot water usage out of your system? And it really depends on your house and what kind of fixtures you have, and that determines, you know, if a trunk and branch is better or a manifold system. So a manifold system, you have hot water coming up out of the water heater, and then in that big trunk, and then it branching off into all the fittings in the house. So if you are at the farthest away bathroom and you turn on the faucet, get some hot water flowing, now you have hot water throughout the whole house. Any fixture is only a couple seconds away from hot water, which is good, but then also could be a waste of hot water depending on how big the house is and how far away that last bathroom is, and so forth, because you got a lot of pipe to fill. The manifold system, each individual fixture has its own hot water line. So you could run the faucet in the farthest away bathroom, that gets hot, but then say your closest bathroom, it's not going to be already primed with hot water, because the hot water didn't go to that bathroom first and then to the farthest one, since they both have two separate lines. So that other bathroom, you'd have to wait a couple extra seconds for hot water. So in a big house, a manifold system usually is not the way to go. Thankfully this house is really small. We're at just about 1,000 square feet, 2-story. So I think the longest run we have from the manifold to the farthest away plumbing fixture is probably only 20 feet. Another major thing I like about this manifold is these shut-off valves. So each one of the home runs where the manifold splits off into all the fixtures in the house, each one of them has its own individual valve. So that is a huge protection. So for instance, this house will be a rental, and if my tenant calls me and says, hey, there's water leaking from the ceiling in the kitchen, well, I know that it's the upstairs bathroom. Maybe I don't know if it's the shower or the toilet, but maybe it's on the left side, so I can assume it's one of those. It's really easy to just run down here or tell the tenant, hey, turn off this bathroom, so they can flip a couple of those valves off, and then we don't have a flood problem. In a trunk and branch system, if there was a leak up there, you'd have to shut the whole water off for the whole house, which is just as easy as doing this, but now the house doesn't have water until you fix the leak, which, you know, could be some time if you gotta tear out some drywall. So this way you can turn off one fixture and repair just that section while the whole rest of the house is still perfectly functional. And that's just fantastic. So from what I can tell in my research with the manifold system, I think it is a really great solution if you have to redo plumbing in a whole house. I would definitely recommend it. Easy to install. Everything's clearly labeled, and there's a valve to shut off everything. I just would say do not use it on a house that is, say, 3,000 square feet or bigger, maybe even 2,500. That gets to the point where a trunk and branch is actually more efficient and effective. And also, if you have an even larger house, a trunk and a branch system is really the way you have to do it. And maybe even having devices to recirculate the hot water so you're not wasting a bunch, because that's really what we're trying to do here, is make it efficient to get hot water places, and then also easy to maintain and reliable. Also, I would not go with a manifold design if, say, your house doesn't have a basement and you don't have a mechanical room where you could mount one of these. You don't want to put this in a wall or in a hard to reach area, even if there's an access panel. I just would not recommend it. Down here in the basement, I got access to all of the lines. Really the only ones that'll be covered up are the ones going upstairs, but I know exactly where they're going to be, and if I do need to repair them in the future, it'll just be a little bit of a drywall patch. Alright, thanks for watching. I know I'm not a professional. I just hope this information is useful. This is the exact information I was looking for when I was deciding whether I should do PEX or copper for my brand new plumbing at this house. And so I hope this will be useful. Please don't take what I say as absolute truth, because like I said, I'm just an amateur. I'm not a professional doing plumbing. And that goes for anything else on my channel. I am just a home buyer, a homeowner like you, trying to figure out what the best way to get the most out of my money renovating a house. So if you like this content, please subscribe. I'll have a ton more videos updating you guys on the house remodel, and we will walk through that. Hopefully I'll get caught up with those videos. Otherwise, I'm gonna do more of these informational videos on on each component that I do to try and help you guys out. So yeah, if you liked it, awesome. See you guys later.